Good day, everyone. My name is John Galbraith, and I am responsible for the overall delivery of the advisory services and one-to-one experiences at Tech Alliance. I am delighted to be hosting today's masterclass, Demystifying the No-Code Movement. As personally, I'm a citizen developer and a no-code nerd, having used it successfully, with tremendous success, in fact, throughout my entrepreneurial career. As the Regional Innovation Center for Southwestern Ontario, Tech Alliance empowers world-class ventures, fuels growth in Canada's innovation economy. We champion and coach entrepreneurs, amplify and impact ventures, and we contribute to a bold community across Southwestern Ontario. If you'd like to engage with our venture growth team, read stories about innovation that's shaping our community, or join upcoming experiences, I invite you to subscribe to our newsletter or book a discovery call using the links that are going to be dropped in the chat. Before we get started with today's masterclass, there's going to be just a couple items. All participants' mics are muted, your cameras are off, so just sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today's masterclass will be recorded and available afterwards on our various media channels, including YouTube. And I encourage you to add questions for our guest, Vladimir, in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. It's not every day that we get a Bay Area founder to have a masterclass with us. So for all the non-technical founders and folks online, I encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity that we have. So what are we doing today? Today, we're going to learn how no-code empowers founders, teams, business leaders, and enterprise with tools to create applications, web products at blazing speeds. Steering our learnings today is a leader in the world of no-code, Vladimir Leytus, founder and CEO of AirDev. And AirDev is a software development agency based in San Francisco that specializes in building powerful custom web applications, as I mentioned, in a fraction of the time, with a fraction of the cost, and a lot less effort than traditional agencies and traditional development processes. AirDev has a wide range of web applications, including two-sided marketplaces, social networks, productivity tools, and process management tools to serve as the foundation for your product and company. AirDev even offers free no-code boot camps through their Chrome extension Canvas. And these boot camps and AirDev, it's not just for founders, it's for business analysts or just anyone interested in building solutions. So with that, I would like to bring and turn things over to Vladimir Leytus, founder and CEO of AirDev. After Vlad's presentation, we are going to be jumping into some questions and answers submitted by our audience, and also ones that I've prepared because I'm so darn excited about this presentation and conversation. So with that, I'll get off my milk crate and turn it over to you, Vlad. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks for the very kind introduction, and I'm really excited to talk to all of you. As John mentioned, I'm the CEO of AirDev. We are a no-code development firm based in San Francisco, California, and I'm going to talk about a few different things as they relate to no-code. I'm sure people have different levels of knowledge when it comes to no-code, so I want to kind of explain what it is. And also talk about some tools that exist in the market, and then talk about kind of where we see the future going, and even give you a little bit of a demo as to how does this stuff really work. So to start, the one point I want to make, and you should take this with a grain of salt. I'm very biased, obviously, being in this industry, but no code is a huge deal. And Gartner, you can see a prediction here that 65% of all application development by 2024 is going to be done with no code. And I very much believe that. I don't know about 65%, but my belief is that no code is going to change how software is built, who builds software, what kinds of founders are able to launch software-based businesses, what kinds of people are able to make a living building software, and it's really going to change everything about how the software development world works. And just to start with what is no code. So you can see kind of a ladder of progression of how software development has gone since the very beginning. So when we created computers and needed to talk to them, the way we would talk to computers was through binary, so zeros and ones. The reason for that is that computers, electricity has only two states, on and off. And so zeros and ones represent those two states. And at the end of the day, anytime we talk to computers, everything still gets translated into zeros and ones. But over time, we figured out that it's very inefficient to give commands to the computer in zeros and ones, because it just takes so many of them to tell the computer to do something. So we added abstractions on top of those zeros and ones. And those abstractions first were assembly code, and then there were programming languages that you have heard of, things like JavaScript and so on. Frameworks, these are things like Ruby on Rails. And NoCode is just the latest iteration of that. It is an abstraction on top of code. And the interesting about this abstraction is that it's the first abstraction that doesn't use the secret language of code, and instead uses a more visual logic-based approach to creating software applications. And what that means, and construction is a parallel that we often use, where back in the day to build a house, you had to go like cut down some trees and like assemble a house from very, very low level components. And it was this very hard thing. You had to have a lot of knowledge. And over time, we standardized a lot about the construction process. And the building blocks became bigger and bigger, to the point where now you even have modular homes where the entire home is a module. And so this is very similar to what happens with software. And the interesting similarity between software and construction is that every house that you build is a little bit different, but it also has a ton of similarities to the other houses. So it's probably 90% similar and 10% different. Software is just like that, where 90% of each piece of software is similar to 90% of other pieces of software. 10% is different. And so this kind of a parallel is very appropriate, where what we're seeing industrialization and standardization of the way that that software is getting created. And so there are a lot of tools out there. You've probably seen investment news about different tools getting a lot of funding. This is just a small subset of those tools. There are probably hundreds of them out there. But the one way we think about no-code software is how specialized or generalized it is. And so, for example, Shopify, very famous tool, which can be considered a no-code tool based in Canada, is very specialized in that it is a great tool for building e-commerce applications. If you want to start an e-commerce store, you would probably use Shopify to do that. And you don't need to use code to do that. You do that without using any code. And underneath it all, it's still translating to code. So in order for the application to work, at the end of the day, it has to use code. But when you're constructing it, you're not using code. And that's really what no code means. And some other tools here that you see that you might be familiar with are things like Typeform for creating forms, Squarespace for creating nice looking websites. Airtable is this great tool for basic databases and data structures. Zapier is I think it's probably one of the most used tools in most organizations, where it's this like connecting tissue glue of the internet, where you can take multiple tools and combine them together. And it's really, truly very powerful. Like you can probably grab, you can build your landing page using something like Squarespace or using something like Webflow, and then you can put a form, you can embed a form on the page using something like Typeform. And then when somebody submits the form, you can use Zapier to then take that information from a form and put it into Airtable and use that as your database. And so you can really stack these tools together to create very powerful experiences that that you wouldn't have been able to create before. You would have needed to know how to code. Now, what we focus on, so what AirDev focuses on is complex web software. So these are things that are traditionally built with code, but we are building without code. And the tool that we use to do that is called Bubble. So you can see it on the very right side of the spectrum. The reason we use this tool is it's like a programming language itself. Even though it's a no-code tool, it is extremely flexible, extremely low level, And it allows you as a result to build basically anything that you want to build. As long as it's a web-based application, you can build any UI, you can build any UX, you can integrate with anything out there. And the reason we exist is because although this tool is a no-code tool, it's not as easy as, let's say, picking up a type form or putting together a type form or making a Squarespace website or putting together an Airtable. Because it's not as easy, what we do is we provide that human layer in the middle of people who really know how to use that tool to build software for other people. So what I thought would be neat now is for me to actually kind of show you what does this mean? What does it look like? So let me share my screen, and I'm going to put together a very basic kind of an application. So this is the bubble editor. This is what we use to build all applications that we build. And you can see it's kind of a blank screen at this point. And there are key areas here that correspond to things you all probably are familiar with, things like data and databases, workflows, what happens when somebody does something in your application, design, what does your application look like? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put together a very basic app. And this app is going to be I'm going to make it be kind of a Reddit product hunt like app for no-code tools. So something where somebody can submit no-code tools and other people can upvote or downvote those no-code tools. So to start, I should put together my data structure. And for data structure, I go to the data tab, and it's going to be something very basic where I already have a table of users. But in addition, I'm going to create a new table. So this is where my data is going to go. And the table is going to be a table of tools. So these are going to be tools like Airtable and so on and so forth. And then I need to create the attributes for each tool. So one is going to be the name. And maybe that's actually sufficient for now. I don't know that I necessarily want to add much more than that. Now I'm going to create a basic design for adding a new tool and displaying the tools that have been added. So I'm going to put in an input. This is what an input is, something that somebody's going to use to actually type in a new tool name. And then I'm going to put in a button that somebody's going to push if they want to submit that tool name to the database. So I'm going to call this button add. And then I'm going to create a view that actually shows the tools that have been added to the database. So I'm going to use something called a repeating group. That's just a concept that Bubble has that allows you to display things. And then I'm going to tell this list that I want to show the list of tools. And then for each tool, I want to show the name of the tool. And to do that, I just put in some text and I say display current tool's name. And then I am going to specify that when this button is pushed, when somebody enters a value in the text box and then pushes this button, we should create a new tool in the database with the name equal to the value that was typed in. And then we should reset the inputs, which just means delete the value that was entered in this input. So I just put together a super basic application. Let me preview it. So I'm going to go to this preview. And by the way, everything I'm previewing, you can yourself preview as well. So all you have to do is go to techalliance-demo.bubbleapps.io/version test, and you'll see the same thing that I'm seeing. You'll be able to interact with it as well. But let me just put in a tool. I'm going to put in tool Bubble. And you can see that I put in a tool, I push the button, and it showed up below. And what happened in the background is that an entry was created in the database. Now, let's make our tool be a little let's make our product be a little bit fancier. So just like Product Hunt or just like Reddit, maybe what this allows you to do is it actually allows you to upvote and vote for your favorite tools. So let me go ahead and do a few things. So one is I'm going to add a number of votes to the tool. So that's going to be a number. I'm going to show the number of votes here. So I'm going to add a piece of text here and show the number of votes. And then I'm going to add an icon that actually allows, maybe I should make this a little prettier and make this bold or something so it's differentiated from everything else. And then I'm going to put an icon here that allows us to upvote. So let's pick an icon that goes up. And when somebody pushes this icon, we will go ahead and increase the number of votes by 1, which just means that I'm updating the database entry to be what it is +1. So votes, list tools, votes +1. And then let's go ahead and preview it. Let me add a couple more tools in here. And you can see these ones showing up. I haven't clicked anything, so people are already clicking stuff, but you can see that if you click, these votes are starting to increment. Obviously, this is not a good tool because it doesn't prevent me from clicking it multiple times. That's something you can build in. It also is very ugly. Obviously, if you were building a real product, you wouldn't make it look like this. But the thing that I just did, which is building this real life application, is something that if you can extend to build almost anything. And you would use the same exact principle that we just used to build this tiny little application to build a really big application. Instead of having one table, you'd have lots of tables. And instead of having just a couple actions, you can have lots of actions. So hopefully this kind of gives you a glimpse of the power of this technology to do stuff that used to require having coders and code, but do it more visually and using logic. So I'm gonna stop sharing for now with that, and I'm gonna go back to my presentation. I wanna make sure I leave some time for questions. But the other thing I wanted to kind of talk about is, I guess, so kind of my journey in this world, how we got here and what AirDev does, just to put a little bit of context behind it. So I came across the world of no-code in 2013. And at that time, there wasn't even no-code wasn't even a term that people used. So I was in business school and came across this new way of building software, this tool called Bubble that was just in its very, very early days, and really fell in love with building software that way. I never knew how to code before, and discovering this tool really made me feel empowered, made me feel like I could do stuff that I couldn't do before. And then I graduated, and along with a classmate of mine, Andrew, back in 2015, we decided, okay, there are a lot more people like us out there than there are coders, people who just never learned how to code, but have logical skills and could put this stuff together if they were just taught how to do that. And so that's why we started AirDev, with the idea that we can bring about this new kind of a developer, a no-code developer, somebody who makes a living building software without having ever coded before. And so that's what we do now. We're kind of a two-sided marketplace where we have, on one side, we have businesses who need some piece of software built. And on the other side, we have freelancers all over the world who are non-coders, but who are building that software using tools like Bubble. And we train people how to do that, and then we give them work. And actually, our training is completely free and open to anyone. So if you're interested, you can check out our training courses. They're at canvas.airdev.co. You can see our bootcamp, and you can sign up for it, and you can yourself do it for free at any point at your own pace. But the thing I wanted to end on and was just a few predictions for what this world, this very new world of no code is going to do. So one thing is, because what no code does is it allows you to build software much faster and much cheaper than you can currently build software for. We believe it's going to democratize software entrepreneurship. And so what what that really means is currently to start a software business, you usually have to get a whole bunch of funding. You either have to be a coder yourself, you have to know how to build a piece of software, or you have to have enough money to hire coders. And coders are very expensive given that they're in very high demand. And so that is a really high barrier to entry, which is the reason why businesses like venture capitalism exist, where you have to go and find some money and hire people. If the cost goes down, if the timelines go down, all of a sudden it takes a fraction of the previous cost to build something. And so we're going to see a lot more people be able to start software businesses. And I think we're going to see one-person software startups, which is kind of an unheard of thing before NoCode. So that's one prediction. Another prediction is there's going to be a lot of niche long-tail software. And so what does that mean? This relates to the previous point. But this point is really about, we're going to see software that's aimed at a very small specific audience that has a specific set of needs. Before, to launch a piece of software, you had to go get venture capital. To be able to get venture capital, you have to convince people that the thing you're working on is a big market and can generate a lot of returns. And so as a result, if you're working on something for a much smaller niche market, you couldn't really get capital. But if all of a sudden the costs are significantly decreased, then it becomes economically viable to actually build businesses for much smaller niche audiences. So we're going to see a lot more of niche long tail software. And then finally, we're going to see, and this is the part that we are most excited about, is we're going to see this new career path of a no-code developer, somebody who is not a coder and just learns how to build this stuff and is building it for people from anywhere in the world, for companies, and is making money doing so. And the fact is that most businesses in the world need some sort of custom software, which is why there's a huge developer shortage. I think right now we're at, I believe it's like a 3 million coder shortage that a lot of coding bootcamps are trying to address. But we believe that the way that will be addressed won't be through turning lots more people into coders, but it'll be through turning lots more people into no-code developers and allowing them to build the same kind of software that otherwise coders would have had to build. So we are very, very excited about this particular bit and bringing about this new kind of a developer. So let me stop sharing at this point, and yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Vlad, thank you so much. We've got lots of questions for you, but I just wanted to take a quick point and just echo some of the things you're saying and some of your predictions there. Personally, so we used to lovingly call that path of software entrepreneurship the Silicon Valley path. That you had to be broke and raise all the money and then convince that person that each dollar they give you is going to be $10 in 5 years, and then you just kind of live life through those trenches and whatnot of raising money. So like you, I also found NoCode, which was knack.com in about 2012, and really felt like a superhuman that I could build and implement software in just a matter of time. And I'm going to speak to your other prediction in the form of a question. So as a business leader and a no-code developer who in the past couple of years, I've made some very deliberate career changes. So I'm curious as to how you, as a CEO at AirDev, how do you leverage no-code, internally and with your team and as a leader in this idea? But also, would you have any advice for me, maybe, about how I can maybe leverage no-code to enhance our employee experience?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, we internally leverage it everywhere. So we use software for every part of our process, and our process is quite extensive to make a product turn a product from somebody's idea to being a completed product. There are a lot of steps in the middle, and we use software for every part of that process. And 95% of that software is built on NoCode, because NoCode is very powerful. We know how to do it, and it just makes sense for us to do it that way. Yeah, I think almost every business could use a NoCode solution somewhere. You need to automate something. You need to make something be scalable from just a couple people to be scalable to hundreds of people. And so I think it's a really, really powerful tool set where with just a little bit of investment into learning it, you can bring tremendous value to basically any organization.
And you've done a great segue for me into my next question, Vladimir, because I don't want to trivialize the effort that it takes to learn no code. You and I had probably similar journeys where I was probably a good 8 to 10 months before I considered myself proficient or a super user with knack.com. More recently, I've had a similar journey with WordPress. I guess that would be more low code, but we're still kind of, it was about 8 months before I was like, I finally get it and the nuance. Because you're still very much learning a language. It's just it's a visual one. So with this in mind, and this idea that there is a learning curve, it's just albeit different. Do you have any platforms that kind of really lean into supporting folks through that learning curve? Is there does Bubble, for example, do a great job of educating folks, or does Adalo, or can you speak to maybe one or two that that really do a good job of that?
Yeah. So I guess there's a couple parts to this. So one is I would probably start, if I were completely new to this world, I would probably not start with a tool like Bubble. I would probably start with something much simpler. So I would specifically, I think the tools that are really useful are the ones that I touched on briefly, which are a combination of Airtable and Zapier. I think those two tools, and maybe Typeform added in. Those two tools can be really powerful and are very easy to pick up. So while other tools like Knack and Bubble take much longer, with Zapier and Airtable, within a couple of days, you can probably cobble together something that kind of works and moves data around and does something useful. So I would start with that, both to learn the basics, but also to kind of serve, like you can actually build something real with those tools. But then if you do want to build something more powerful, a real scalable application, then strongly recommend Bubble. We think it's the best tool out there at this point for building web applications. And for learning Bubble, there are a couple key resources. So Bubble themselves, they have a ton of, or they have a few decent tutorials on their website. So once you sign up, they'll guide you through a few tutorials. But we actually, like our bootcamp, I think, is also one of the better ways to learn Bubble. And like I said, it's completely free and open to anyone. So I think those two tools are probably a good introduction, but I completely agree with you in that if you do want to become proficient in this, I would expect to devote weeks and probably months to learning before you can actually build something real.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a pretty realistic expectation, and I'd agree with you, Vlad. And just to the point of your boot camp, we had one of our staff members attend one of your boot camps with great success, and just the learning that was achieved in 3 weeks, just as a little bit of a, I guess, testimonial in real time. But you mentioned something there in your last answer when we talk about kind of maybe if we're hacking together, and I use that lovingly, Airtable and Typeform and Zapier. We hear from skeptics about, well, that's internal, when you want to build real software, come talk to me. Or maybe it's like the idea of it's a developer that isn't drinking the Kool-Aid yet on no code. And they'll say maybe, yeah, this no code's great for prototyping, or maybe vaporware, or that idea when you want to build it properly, come see me. Now, I want to be really clear, and I'll ask you a very deliberate question and very direct question. No code is real scalable software, right?
That is correct. I will add some caveats to that. So,
okay.
First of all, no code is still in its very early days. So this is we're 5% in, or some small number of percent into what the future of no code is going to look like. Even at this point, it is absolutely used for real production grade applications. We have clients that have raised millions of dollars on using their products, that are running, that have run billions of dollars of transactions through these products, that are running their entire businesses on no code applications. So these are not toys, these are real production products. Now, that being said, I think it's worth noting what some of the limitations are of no code technology. So the first one is you should only use no code if the thing that you're building, if your business and your product isn't a technical innovation. And that's the case for most software products. So for example, if you're launching Airbnb for something, there's no technical innovation there. There's no new technology that you're inventing. The technology has been used many, many times before to build many, many different products. You're just applying it in a different business context. But if you're launching some sort of a new media editor or some new technology that doesn't currently exist, maybe it's some AI machine learning thing, that's when no code is probably not good, because by the very definition, you are building a new technology, and so you're not going to be able to use the pre-existing building blocks to build that new technology. So I think that's one key thing to think about is, are you building a new business model on top of existing technology, or are you building a whole new technology? Most of the time, the answer is it's a new business model on top of existing technology. That's one factor. Second factor is scalability. So there is definitely still a limit to scalability as to how high these no-code products can go. So if you are, building Facebook and you're expecting to have 1 billion or even 10 million users the next day, no-code probably still can't handle it. If it's like 100,000 people, it can handle it. But if it's like 10 million people, it can't. And so there is some limit as to just how much stuff and how much activity one of these tools can handle. And that limit is increasing over time. So in 10 years, my answer would be, yeah, fine, no problem. You can build a no-code tool and handle it. But currently, that's not the answer. So I think you do have to kind of dig into the details a bit. But the short answer is yes, you can absolutely build production-grade products using no-code even today.
That's awesome. And I've got a couple. I'm just going to jump over to the Q&A here that we have. So one from Andre, Vlad, has COVID increased demand for your customers for no-code software and no-code software development?
We have seen a bump in demand over the past year. It's really hard to attribute it to, I don't know exactly what to attribute it to. It could be that businesses are looking to innovate more as a result of needing to adjust their business model to COVID and just other factors. It could be that no code is just matured and has become a more kind of a buzzier word, and as a result, there's more demand. So we've definitely seen an uptick, but I can't exactly attribute it to like a specific single factor.
Maybe it's just more people at home trying to solve big problems. You know what I mean?
That's the other potential big factor for sure.
Sure. Do you have, going back to, I think, the question before, we talked about, like, can we actually scale a business on no code? Do you know any kind of high level example without that would be publicly shared, that's a significant software solution that's on no code?
Yeah, I don't know about kind of examples that lots of people have heard of. One example that we have in our portfolio, and this one is public, is this company called Dividend Finance, which is a solar financing platform. We built their original product more than 5 years ago. And they came to us because they were in a desperate situation. They needed to launch something very quickly, and they just didn't have the time to code a product from scratch. And so they were like, oh, let's try this crazy no-code thing and see how that works out. And fast forward, several years, they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, have a whole bunch of employees, hundreds of employees, and now they have an internal tech team, and they have stuff that they've coded also. But the stuff that they've coded talks to the no-code products, and now they're integrated via APIs. So there are definitely examples, but once again, these are very early days, so there hasn't been enough time for there to be lots and lots of examples out there yet.
No, I agree with that, but you make a good point that, hey, no code is API-able. You can talk to these solutions with other solutions, right?
That's right, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be all no code, or it can be this part is a no code, the front end is a no code, or some of the back end is a no code, and then it talks to something else via APIs that's coded conventionally. I think sometimes businesses want to have very tight control over certain parts of their workflow, and so that's the stuff that they would probably do in code, and then for other stuff they would do it in no code and connect it to.
So traditional developers, and this is going to kind of, my friend Shakib posted a question for us, and I had a similar question, because traditional developers have lots of communities where they can share best practice or even distribute their code through GitHub. They crowdsource insight about, hey, I have this problem, and other developers will, share little code snippets. And So, first of all, do no coders have similar communities, or are they product based? Or maybe you can talk to a little bit about that.
Yeah, there definitely are communities that have been popping up. So some are verticalized and product based. So Bubble has a forum where that's very active. There's a lot of stuff happening on it all the time. I know Airtable has its own community. There are these vertical niche communities for specific products. And then some are horizontal across multiple tools where it's for no code builders or no code founders. And I think there are Slack groups out there and Discord groups out there and forums out there. So there's a whole bunch of stuff out there for this.
Cool. We talked about your house analogy, and it kind of that made a lot of sense to me. And your visualization even made it more sense because, and going back to the Silicon Valley approach, when you're always building net new, it's those things like user authentication and all those little microservices that go into the app that take
Right.
the lion's share, that really take the lion's share of the development process. But I think like you guys in Bubble have even took that one step further. So can you explain how like templates and plugins and extensions work?
Yeah, definitely. So, and there are probably many ways to talk about it. I'll just talk about what we do. So, Bubble, the reason we use Bubble is it's a very flexible, powerful framework. As you could see, I can control every little pixel on the screen. I can control every action. I can control every integration. What that allows us to do as a development firm is build anything that somebody wants. So when somebody comes to us and says, hey, I want this very specific thing, we can say, yeah, we can do that. And if we build something for them originally, and then a year later, they want something different, we can, with confidence, tell them we'll be able to do it because we're using this very flexible tool. The downside of that is because it's so flexible, it's also harder to build stuff. And so what we do then on top is we standardize a lot of UI, UX, user flows. So we have this tool that sits on top of Bubble that's called Canvas. And what Canvas is a standardized building framework that allows us to say, user authentication exists in every application. Why don't we just build a standardized user authentication flow for creating a user account, for resetting your password, for managing your account? And we don't need to rebuild that next time. And we can just focus on building the stuff that's unique to an application. And the examples of things that we standardize are things like UI. So a profile page, lots of applications need profile pages. Why don't we create standardized profile pages? It's UX, things like messengers. Let's create an experience for what a messenger is like. And so what we do then is we create these standard modules that sit on top of Bubble. And so then when somebody wants to build an application, you just pick some modules off the shelf, combine them together, and you are 70% done. And you just need to focus your 30% effort on doing the unique stuff for your specific use case.
Cool. Cool. I know, that's really the planning that goes into a lot of the startup stuff, and the gaps between the trajectory of innovation and the trajectory of traditional development, I think, has really been shortened. That, as a non-technical founder, when you give your developer an item to build, let's say, and then you wait 2 weeks for it, and you're like, oh my God, it's wrong. It's so wrong. And then so like that trajectory that it's also taken 2 weeks, but it's wrong probably because I've had 2 weeks to think about it and I've developed it further in my head. So the traditional developer never really had a chance to maybe make me happy. So I love how no code has really solved that. I'm just looking at one, and I want to make sure KK leaves here just with an understanding of the technical limitations, or the technical limitations for technical applications. One thing that you mentioned is that if you're building something net new, like a new innovation, then no code just it can't replicate it because there is no coded version of it. And two would be kind of fast, scale, heavy traffic, and kind of the far limits of penetration testing, I guess, if you will. Would those be two of the major areas of concern, or areas of?
Those are two major areas. So on the first one, just to clarify a little bit, sometimes you can get around that by building the new thing in code and then connecting it to a no-code tool, so that you get the benefits of no code, the ability to build really fast, but you have some underlying coded technology. So it's just that you can't build the whole thing on no code, but you might be able to build a part that's new technology. Maybe it's like a new machine learning algorithm. Mm-hmm. So that new machine learning algorithm you would build in code, and then you connect it to your application, and your application would be built using no code. So that's kind of like one little caveat or asterisk for that first point. The other one I would name as a limitation currently is native mobile apps. So what we build are web apps. So those are apps accessible through your browser. Could be your phone browser, could be your computer browser, but it's a browser. Native apps, so like building an app like Uber, which kind of has to be native, or building an app like WhatsApp, which has to be native. There are tools out there that are going after that market, but we haven't yet seen a tool that's quite powerful enough in the native space as Bubble is in the web app space. And so you can build basic things, but there isn't quite something like this out there yet. Once again, in a few years, I think it'll be a different story. But that's the other limitation, is the way that we build is really best suited for web apps versus fully native mobile experiences.
Understood. So I'm just being mindful of time here, Vlad. And one thing as an entrepreneurial community and an entrepreneurial ecosystem, one of the things that I strive to do in my position is really humanize founding a company and running a successful company. So I was wondering, maybe to wrap us up today, if you might be interested in sharing your biggest entrepreneurial blunder. Have you had a big mess up and kind of a oh crap moment that you could share with us?
Yeah, I'm sure there's been a ton of different ones. I don't know if this is probably not the biggest, but the one that just came to mind, just because it's more recent, is and it's kind of a very US specific one, so I don't know how interesting it is. But when we formed our company, we had to choose between different corporation types, and there's LLCs and C corps and S corps, and so we got some advice, and we went with one kind of a company, and it seemed like such a small decision at the time, and it was kind of like, okay, let's go with this one, and let's do that, and that has presented all kinds of challenges since then, and we're actually likely in the process of converting to a different kind of a company, which has resulted in lots of expenses, both legal and time, and just this one little tiny action that just could have gone one way or the other, causing lots of unexpected consequences later. So I guess the lesson there is just to really do a lot of homework when making big decisions like that.
Absolutely, and very relatable up here too. It's not simple, none of this stuff is simple, and I appreciate you sharing that, Vlad. And man, I bet you I could probably sit on here with you for another little while, but I know you probably got a busy day. I can't thank you enough for your time today, for your insights, for your just kind of off the cuff answers to questions that are really, in some cases, keeping entrepreneurs up at night about how they're going to get their business to market and how they're going to validate their different ideas. So thank you tremendously. Thanks everyone for coming today. Vlad, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, John and the team.
Do it again sometime, Vlad. All the best.
Awesome.
Cheers.
All right.